What happens when the bonds of family unravel beyond repair? Can a heart, once shattered by betrayal, ever truly heal? Tonight's story challenges our understanding of love, forgiveness, and the devastating consequences of unchecked trauma. In the depths of human suffering, there exists a tale so haunting it defies our basic understanding of family bonds. This is not merely a story of heartbreak, it delves deeper into the abyss of human nature, where love and betrayal dance a deadly waltz, and where choices, once made, can never be undone. Welcome to True Crime Stories Archive, your gateway to the chilling world of real-life horror. Here, we delve into the darkest corners of humanity, unearthing terrifying stories of true crime that will leave you sleeping with the lights on. Before we begin, I urge you to subscribe and join our community as we explore the depths of human nature through these haunting tales. In a modest neighborhood where porch lights still burned warm and neighbors knew each other's stories, lived a woman whose strength would be tested beyond mortal limits. Dolores Mayfield, known affectionately as Mama D, stood as a pillar of quiet resilience in her community. At 59, her face bore the gentle lines of a life lived in service to others, while her eyes held secrets of sorrows few could comprehend. The rhythms of Dolores's life once flowed with purpose and grace. Her days were filled with honest work as a housekeeper, her evenings dedicated to prayer and community. She was the kind of woman who made everyone feel like family, whose home seemed to radiate warmth even on the coldest nights. But beneath this carefully maintained facade lay a heart scarred by unimaginable loss. Before tragedy rewrote her story, Dolores's world revolved around her only child, Mariah, and her son-in-law Julius. They were her masterpiece, her legacy, the living proof that love could build something beautiful in this harsh world. Mariah inherited her mother's gentle spirit and Julius brought laughter into their lives with his quick wit and kind heart. Together, they had given Dolores her greatest joy, a grandson named Khalil. But fate had other plans for this family, plans that would test the very foundations of their faith and love. On a rain-slicked highway, when darkness masked the treacherous curves of the road, a single moment shattered their carefully constructed world. The crash that claimed Mariah and Julius left more than twisted metal and broken glass, it left a void that would consume both Dolores and young Khalil in ways neither could have imagined. The news of the accident struck like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Dolores was preparing her evening tea, the same ritual she had followed for decades, when the phone's shrill ring pierced the quiet of her home. The words that followed, accident, fatal, immediate response needed, seemed to echo through her kitchen like fragments of a nightmare she couldn't escape. In the aftermath of that devastating night, Dolores found herself thrust into a role she never expected to play again, that of a mother to a traumatized teenager. Khalil, just 14 and already bearing wounds deeper than any child should know, came to live under her roof. The boy who once bounded through her door with weekend enthusiasm now shuffled in with shoulders heavy with grief, his eyes holding shadows no amount of love seemed able to chase away. The transition wasn't just emotional, it demanded everything Dolores had and more. Her modest income as a housekeeper, once sufficient for her simple needs, now had to stretch to cover school supplies, growing teenage appetites, and the countless unexpected expenses that came with raising a child. She took on extra cleaning jobs, working her fingers raw, determined that Khalil would want for nothing even as her own back ached and her feet throbbed from long days of labor. In those early years, Dolores poured every ounce of her being into creating a stable environment for Khalil. Her home, once a quiet refuge, transformed into a space designed to nurture and heal. Photos of Mariah and Julius adorned the walls, their smiling faces a constant reminder of the love that had built this family. She maintained their traditions, Sunday dinners, morning prayers, holiday celebrations, hoping these familiar rhythms would somehow anchor Khalil in a world that had turned upside down. But grief has a way of morphing, of taking root in unexpected places. While Dolores channeled her pain into care and devotion, Khalil's sorrow began to curdle into something darker. The first signs were subtle, missed homework assignments, sporadic mood swings, the occasional sharp word where once there had been respect. Dolores attributed these changes to normal teenage adjustment, to the natural rebellion that comes with adolescence compounded by unimaginable loss. She held on to hope like a lifeline, believing that her love, her prayers, and her unwavering dedication would be enough to guide Khalil through these turbulent waters. Each night, after he had gone to bed, she would kneel beside her own bed, fingers clasped so tight her knuckles turned white, begging God for guidance, for strength, for some sign that she was doing right by her daughter's only child. But as weeks turned to months, and months to years, the distance between grandmother and grandson grew like a chasm, silent but ever widening. The sweet boy who once sought comfort in her embrace was disappearing, replaced by a young man whose eyes held a coldness that sent chills down Dolores's spine. Yet still she persisted, clinging to her faith and her memories of better days, unaware that the true test of her strength was yet to come. As Khalil entered his late teens, the transformation in his behavior became impossible to ignore. The hallways of their modest home, once filled with the warmth of family bonds, grew heavy with tension. Every shut door echoed like a gunshot, every unanswered question hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. At 18, Khalil's rebellion blazed into full force. The neighborhood that had once whispered prayers for the orphaned boy now locked their doors when they saw him coming. His choice of friends raised red flags, young men with hard eyes and harder reputations, who drove past Dolores's house at all hours, their car stereos breaking the peace of quiet evenings. The sweet scent of marijuana began to linger in his clothes, mixing with the sharper tang of alcohol that he couldn't quite hide. Dolores watched this descent with growing horror, her heart breaking anew with each fresh transgression. Her grandson's once warm brown eyes, so like his mother's, now held a glazed disconnection that frightened her. The signs of drug use became more apparent, money missing from her purse, her jewelry disappearing piece by piece, each loss a small betrayal that she struggled to reconcile with her memories of the loving child he had once been. School became a battlefield of missed classes and disciplinary meetings. Teachers who had once praised Khalil's potential now spoke in hushed tones about their concerns. Dolores sat through each conference, her back straight despite the weight of shame pressing down on her shoulders, nodding as educators detailed her grandson's infractions. She made promises she wasn't sure she could keep, about stricter oversight and consequences that seemed to lose their power with each passing day. By 23, Khalil had morphed into someone Dolores barely recognized. His tall frame, once carried with the natural grace of youth, now moved with an aggressive swagger. Jobs came and went like seasons, a week at the local garage, 2 days at a warehouse, each opportunity squandered through tardiness or absence. The pattern became painfully familiar, initial enthusiasm followed by mounting excuses, then silence, then the inevitable phone call announcing another position lost. The nights became a torment of waiting and wondering. Dolores would sit in her kitchen, a cup of tea growing cold before her, straining to hear the sound of his key in the lock. Sometimes he wouldn't return until dawn, stumbling through the door reeking of smoke and poor choices. Other times, he'd disappear for days, leaving her to imagine the worst, her prayers becoming increasingly desperate pleas for his safety and salvation. His relationships with women mirrored the chaos of his life, a parade of troubled souls who seemed drawn to his damaged intensity. They would appear suddenly, stay briefly, and vanish just as quickly, leaving behind only the echoes of arguments and slammed doors. Dolores watched these cycles with growing concern, recognizing in these young women the same lost look that haunted her grandson's eyes. The financial strain of supporting Khalil's unstable lifestyle began to take its toll. Dolores's savings, carefully built over decades of honest work, dwindled as she covered his bounced checks, paid off his debts, and tried to keep him from falling completely through society's cracks. Each time she opened her purse, each time she wrote another check to bail him out of trouble, she told herself it was what any mother would do, what Mariah would have wanted her to do. The weight of years spent walking on eggshells finally reached its crescendo on a night that would forever alter both their lives. The autumn air hung heavy with an approaching storm, mirroring the tension building within the walls of their home. Dolores had reached her limit, her patience worn thin by decades of disappointment and fear. That morning, she had discovered her retirement savings completely depleted. Khalil had somehow gained access to her account. These weren't just dollars and cents, they represented years of backbreaking work, countless hours spent on her knees scrubbing other people's floors, thousands of early mornings when her aging bones protested every movement. The confrontation began like many before it, Dolores waiting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The wooden chair that had held her through countless solitary meals now seemed to creak with the weight of her resolve. She had finally accepted that her love alone couldn't save her grandson. Sometimes love meant making the hardest choices. When Khalil stumbled through the door well past midnight, the sharp smell of alcohol and something more sinister clinging to his clothes, Dolores didn't raise her voice. Instead, she spoke with a quiet determination that cut through his drug-induced haze. She laid out her ultimatum: get help, make real changes, or leave. No more enabling, no more excuses, no more watching him destroy himself under her roof. The silence that followed her words seemed to stretch for an eternity. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, nature providing a backdrop to the storm brewing within. Khalil's face, illuminated by the harsh kitchen fluorescence, transformed from confusion to anger, his features twisting into something unrecognizable. What happened next unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Khalil's rage, fueled by substances and years of unprocessed trauma, erupted with volcanic force. The kitchen, once a place of warm memories and shared meals, became the setting for an act of violence so profound it would haunt both their dreams forever. In his drug-addled state, Khalil didn't just reject his grandmother's ultimatum, he shattered every boundary of human decency. The assault that followed was brutal, a violation not just of body but of every sacred trust between family members. Dolores, despite her age and frailer frame, fought back with the desperate strength of someone who couldn't believe this was happening at the hands of her own flesh and blood. The physical pain, though intense, paled in comparison to the emotional devastation. As her grandson forced himself upon her, Dolores's mind struggled to reconcile the monster before her with the sweet boy who had once called her Mama D, who had once curled up in her lap seeking comfort from thunderstorms just like the one raging outside. In the haunting stillness that followed the assault, Dolores's world crumbled into unrecognizable pieces. Her home, once a sanctuary of warmth and faith, had transformed into a crime scene etched with unspeakable memories. As dawn broke, casting shadows through the kitchen windows where she had spent countless mornings in prayer, the full weight of what transpired began to settle like lead in her bones. Khalil, sobered by the enormity of his actions, collapsed into a corner, his face buried in his hands. The morning light revealed the destruction, not just the physical evidence of struggle, but the complete shattering of a family bond that had endured through decades of hardship. The grandson who had once been her last connection to Mariah had become the architect of her deepest nightmare. Days merged into weeks, each moment a fresh torment as Dolores attempted to navigate the aftermath. She moved through her house like a ghost, unable to find comfort in the familiar corners where she had raised both her daughter and grandson. Sleep became elusive, her nights plagued by memories she couldn't escape. The simple act of existing in spaces that now held such darkness required strength she wasn't sure she possessed. The initial physical discomfort evolved into concerning symptoms that couldn't be ignored. Her body, already weary from years of physical labor, began to betray her in new ways. Fatigue settled deep in her bones, accompanied by recurring headaches that no amount of prayer or pain medication seemed to touch. When the weakness became too pronounced to dismiss, she finally gathered the courage to seek medical attention. The hospital visit that followed delivered another devastating blow. The doctor's words fell like heavy stones in the sterile examination room: HIV positive. The diagnosis struck with the force of a physical blow, adding another layer of trauma to an already unbearable situation. The virus, transmitted through the violent assault, represented a permanent reminder of that horrific night. When Khalil learned of her diagnosis, the reality of his actions seemed to finally penetrate the walls of denial he had built around himself. His own subsequent testing confirmed what they both feared: he too carried the virus, though he couldn't pinpoint when or how he had contracted it. His history of reckless behavior and substance abuse had created a web of consequences that now ensnared them both. The weight of this revelation pressed down on Dolores like a physical burden. Each time she swallowed the prescribed medications, each moment she felt the fatigue washing over her, served as a reminder of how completely her life had been altered. Her faith, once an unshakable foundation, wavered under the strain of trying to understand how God could allow such suffering. In the quiet hours of early morning, when sleep remained elusive, Dolores found herself wrestling with an impossible decision. The love she held for her grandson battled against the need for justice, for accountability. The same hands that had once wiped away his childhood tears had inflicted wounds that would never fully heal. How could she reconcile the boys she had raised with the man who had destroyed their lives? For weeks, she carried this burden alone, her prayers becoming increasingly desperate pleas for guidance. The community that had once embraced them remained unaware of the darkness that had descended upon their household. Dolores maintained her facade of strength, even as she felt herself crumbling inside. She continued her housekeeping work, though each movement brought pain, each interaction required a mask of normalcy she wasn't sure she could maintain. The turning point came on a Sunday morning, as church bells rang in the distance. Dolores sat in her favorite armchair, the one where she had spent countless hours rocking Khalil as a child, and reached for her phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911, each number feeling like a betrayal of everything she had fought to protect. But as the dispatcher's voice crackled through the line, she found strength in the certainty that she could no longer carry this burden alone. The arrival of police officers shattered the morning's quiet. Their presence transformed her modest home into a flurry of activity, questions asked, statements taken, evidence collected. Khalil, perhaps sensing the inevitable, offered no resistance when they placed the handcuffs around his wrists. The metallic click of the restraints echoed through the house like a final punctuation mark on their shared story. News of the arrest spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The community that had watched Khalil grow from a grieving child to a troubled young man now struggled to comprehend the magnitude of his crimes. Whispers followed Dolores at church, in grocery stores, on the streets where she had once walked with pride. Some offered awkward condolences, others averted their eyes, but all carried the weight of unspoken judgment. The legal process unfolded with mechanical precision. The charges mounted: rape, assault, drug possession. Each court appearance forced Dolores to relive the horror of that night, each piece of evidence presented another nail in the coffin of their family's legacy. The prosecutor painted a picture of escalating violence and unchecked addiction, while the defense scrambled to attribute Khalil's actions to his traumatic past. The medical evidence proved damning. Hospital records documented not just the physical trauma of the assault but also the life-altering consequences, the HIV diagnosis that would forever link their fates. Experts testified about the transmission of the virus, about the likelihood that Khalil's drug use and risky behavior had exposed him to infection long before that fateful night. Throughout the trial, Dolores maintained her composure, even as her heart shattered anew with each revelation. She watched her grandson, seated at the defendant's table in his prison jumpsuit, searching for any sign of the child she had loved so deeply. The void between them seemed vast and unbridgeable, filled with the ghosts of what might have been. The community divided in its response. Some praised Dolores for her courage in coming forward, while others questioned how she could turn against her own blood. The same church that had once celebrated their family's resilience now buzzed with conflicting opinions about justice, forgiveness, and the limits of familial loyalty. Each passing week brought new challenges. The stress of the trial combined with her deteriorating health forced Dolores to reduce her working hours. The financial strain mounted as medical bills piled up alongside legal documentation. Yet she persevered, drawing strength from a well of determination she hadn't known she possessed. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the moment of judgment arrived with crushing finality. The courtroom sat heavy with anticipation, its wooden benches filled with spectators who had followed every twist and turn of this tragic tale. 20 years, the sentence fell like a hammer blow, with possibility of parole after 15. The numbers echoed through the courtroom, each year representing months, weeks, and days that would stretch endlessly before both Dolores and Khalil. The judge's words cut through the tension with surgical precision. He spoke of betrayal, of the sacred trust between family members shattered beyond repair. The severity of the sentence reflected not just the physical assault, but the lasting impact of HIV transmission, a life sentence of its own kind that would follow both victim and perpetrator. Each charge was detailed meticulously: rape, assault, drug possession, all compounding into a punishment that would consume what should have been the prime years of Khalil's life. For Dolores, the verdict brought a complex mixture of relief and renewed grief. Justice had been served, but at what cost? Her grandson would spend decades behind bars, and she would spend her remaining years managing a chronic illness, both carrying permanent reminders of that devastating night. The satisfaction of legal victory felt hollow against the backdrop of their shattered family legacy. In the aftermath of the trial, Dolores returned to a home that felt both empty and haunted. Khalil's room remained untouched, a shrine to better days that now felt like a museum of lost possibilities. The photos on the walls, Mariah's smile, Julius's proud stance, young Khalil's innocent face, seemed to watch her with questioning eyes, as if asking where it all went wrong. The medical reality of her condition demanded attention. Regular doctor visits became part of her new routine, each appointment a reminder of how completely her life had changed. The cocktail of HIV medications required strict adherence, their side effects adding another layer of challenge to her daily existence. Yet even in this, Dolores found a way to persist, approaching her health challenges with the same quiet dignity that had carried her through decades of adversity. The community's response evolved over time. Initial shock and scandal gave way to a deeper understanding of the complexities of trauma and its generational impact. Some neighbors who had initially distanced themselves gradually returned, offering support in small but meaningful ways: a prepared meal, a ride to medical appointments, a listening ear when the burden became too heavy to bear alone. Her church family, though divided at first, ultimately rallied around her. Prayer circles expanded to include both her health and Khalil's redemption. The pastor spoke of forgiveness and healing, though Dolores knew these would be lifelong journeys rather than immediate destinations. Her faith, tested beyond measure, began to transform into something deeper and more nuanced, a recognition that even in the darkest valleys, grace could still be found. Letters began arriving from Khalil in prison. The first few remained unopened on her kitchen table, their presence both an accusation and a plea. When she finally found the strength to read them, she discovered pages filled with remorse, with attempts to understand his own actions, with desperate hopes for forgiveness. Each letter forced her to confront the complexity of love that persists even after unforgivable acts. Visitors to her home often remarked on her resilience, though Dolores never saw herself as particularly strong. She was simply putting one foot in front of the other, navigating a path she never expected to walk. The questions continued to haunt her: could she have done something differently? Were there signs she missed? Could intervention at some crucial moment have altered their trajectory? As years passed, Dolores found purpose in sharing her story with support groups for families affected by addiction and violence. Her experience, though deeply personal, resonated with others who struggled to reconcile love for family members with the need for accountability. Through these connections, she discovered that her pain, when shared, could help others find their way through similar darkness. Time marches forward relentlessly, leaving Dolores to navigate the complex landscape of her new reality. Each morning brings its own set of challenges: the medications that keep her condition managed, the quiet moments when memories threaten to overwhelm, and the constant reminder that somewhere behind prison walls, her grandson battles his own demons. Her story serves as a stark reminder that sometimes love alone isn't enough to heal deep-seated trauma. The path that led from the tragic loss of Mariah and Julius to that fateful night of violence demonstrates how unaddressed grief can fester, transforming into something dark and uncontrollable. The price paid by both grandmother and grandson stands as a testament to the devastating cost of choices left unchecked. The questions still linger in the community. Could something have been done differently? Were there moments when intervention might have changed their course? The answers remain elusive, lost in the maze of what-ifs and might-have-beens. Each family gathering in the neighborhood, each empty chair at community events, serves as a reminder of the tragedy that unfolded within those modest walls. For those who know Dolores, her story has become both a warning and an inspiration. A warning about the dangers of enabling destructive behavior, about the importance of addressing trauma before it consumes everything in its path. Yet also an inspiration, showing how one can survive the unsurvivable, how dignity can persist even in the face of ultimate betrayal. Her legacy now extends beyond the boundaries of family. Through her experience, others have found the courage to confront similar situations in their own lives. Support groups and counseling centers often reference her case when discussing the complex intersections of family loyalty, accountability, and healing. The weight of HIV remains a daily reminder of that night, yet Dolores has refused to let it define her entirely. Each pill she takes, each doctor's visit she attends, becomes an act of survival rather than surrender. Her condition, though permanent, has become just another thread in the tapestry of her resilience. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family violence, about the ways trauma can echo through generations, about the difficult choices we sometimes must make to protect ourselves from those we love most. It challenges our understanding of forgiveness and justice, asking us to consider where one ends and the other begins. To our viewers, we ask, what would you have done in Dolores's position? How do we balance love and accountability when dealing with family members who cause harm? Your thoughts and experiences matter, share them in the comments below. Remember to subscribe to True Crime Stories Archive for more in-depth explorations of cases that challenge our understanding of human nature. Together, we can learn from these stories, working to prevent similar tragedies from unfolding in our own communities. Life continues for Dolores Mayfield, each day a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Her story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope can persist. Though the path forward may be marked by scars, it still leads toward dawn. This story serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers lurk not in dark alleys or among strangers, but within the very walls we consider safe. It challenges us to examine our own relationships, to recognize the signs of trauma before they explode into violence, and to understand that true love sometimes means making the hardest choices.